Okay, so there's a couple things that we want to do tonight. One is we want to take the next step in getting into information literature, information literacy, and understanding kind of how we want to approach our project. And then I'm going to go over the actual document, their final research project. It'll lay out the details of how this project should go. As I had been saying, tonight is the assignment of you choosing your topic, and then it's due next week. So um, if you've already taken a look at this week's lesson plan, you'll see that there's a link out here. It's the assignment one link. And if you've used Blackboard before, there's a couple of different ways that you can actually get an assignment into Blackboard. One is to just basically enter your response in this text submission area right here. That's what you'll do for at least this first assignment. And then assignment 2, 3, and 4, and actually, yeah, 2, 3, and 4, you'll actually upload a document. So for this one, I mean, you can if you want. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do this. If you type in here or paste into here, probably the best way to do would be to kind of write it out in a Word doc and save it, or a Sheets, or I'm sorry, Google Doc, or a Word doc, and then just paste the content in here. So you'll do your topic in kind of the format that I have in so kind of like in this format right here. Research topic is this, and then a sentence or two or three, whatever it takes, to kind of talk about what your topic is going to be. So literally, it's just this kind of format right here. So you can copy that and you can paste it in here, or if you'd prefer doing it in a Word doc, that's fine. And just click on the browse my computer, and then you'll get your ability to upload your document right there, and then click the submit button. This one, I believe, and let me just take a real quick look here. I have given you a few uploads on this one. Yeah, 3 attempts on this one. So if you do your project and it turns out that it's not focused enough, or it needs to have a little bit of a tweak to it, you have 3 upload attempts. And if you need more, I can give you more. It's not a one and done kind of project, or not a one and done kind of assignment. All right, so this one really is important because this sets the stage for you being able to research, outline it, and then really write it. If it's not on the mark, really, on this assignment, it's tough to do the rest of it. So that's the assignment for tonight. Go on and read the next chapter in information literacy. Pretty good book. Literally, that book right there kind of gives you the entire cookbook recipe for how to do research. Again, you know, it's pretty wide and comprehensive in terms of the kinds of project that you can do on it. You may not need to go through that kind of rigor if you're doing a smaller project, or you're doing some sort of work project, but it gives you the framework for doing that. I will, let's see. This is actually a good section here. This link right here. It's the annotated bibliography phases. This is in another video from a prior class, Professor Muckle's class. We've been seeing a couple of his videos. I like to kind of reuse a lot of the stuff that has been used in prior classes. I'm not going to go over this one. I'll let you watch that video after class is over. But I will talk about search techniques a little bit, talk a little bit more about using Google efficiently, and then some information literacy search techniques. So some things, hopefully, maybe you know a lot of this stuff already, but hopefully there'll be at least a few new things in there. And then I like to kind of open up the lecture with some real world examples of analytics, informatics. In this particular example, it's Walmart. This article is a little bit older, a couple of years old. I'll go over that real quick. I want to point out a few things, especially if you're, again, this is an informatics class, so we're going to talk about data information and that kind of thing. And I want to talk a little bit about that and what Walmart's doing, where there's always a practical example somewhere along the line. Then I'll go over this lecture material right here. And then finally, we'll talk about the specifics of the research project. You can download that document if you want later on. All right, so let's see what Walmart's doing. So Walmart has been probably one of the best up until, I could argue, Amazon is now sort of the leader in supply chain and logistics, moving goods from one place to another quickly, efficiently, and at the least cost. That's one of the reasons why Walmart was the cost leader for the longest time. They were great at getting products from the manufacturer or the supplier to their warehouses. They were one of the first to really implement RFID to touchless, make all of their inventory management touchless. So RFID tags, if you've ever gone to a retailer and gone into a store and there's these little plastic tags stuck to the high value clothes, the high value goods, those are RFID tags essentially. So if you walked out of the store with that tag on there, those two, looks like a sort of like a wall, these two big, they're called readers, but they look like two walls next to the doors as you're going out. Well, those RFID readers basically have a couple things that they do. One is they emit a little bit of electricity, and that little bit of electricity charges the tags, at least the ones that are on the clothing. They're called passive tags, and they charge those tags. And then when the tag reaches a certain voltage, it emits information that's on it. So the other part of that wall, if you will, that reader, is to read any signals that come off the tag. So it sends out electricity and it reads back data. It's continuously doing that. So if it reads back any data, it shouldn't. It should just be sending out electricity and nothing happens. Then if it's reading some data back, or it gets a sort of like a ping back of data, then that means there's something there. So it just goes off, right? So it's assuming that, there's an RFID tag there that shouldn't be, and it goes off. So concept is pretty similar for the way goods are moved in this country and around the world. So what Walmart is doing with their suppliers is they have such good data that they, with that data, can really understand what's the optimal way to get goods moved from the manufacturer to Walmart. And what does it mean when goods show up on time? What does it mean when they show up late? And what does it mean when you can't fulfill inventory requirements? So they've got all that data. They've analyzed all that data and they've modeled all that data. It's just another part of analytics. So what they found is that, again, they have to compete with Amazon because Amazon is, the big player. So everybody wants to get into the Amazon stores and everybody wants to sell on Amazon. So they're the ones that can sort of make the rules. So in order to compete with Amazon's quick turnaround, their 2-day prime, and they're 1 day in some cases, and even less than that in some of the cities, they have to do similar kinds of things. Well, what they found is that they believe that they need to have one of their suppliers ship a full truck of product and deliver within a 2-day window 87% of the time. So basically what they're trying to do here is determine what level of inventory they need and then get that inventory in the 2-day window they need it 87% of the time. That way they reduce the risk of out of stock, and they also increase the efficiency by which they move that product from the supplier to their actual stores. Okay, so they've really tightened the window a little bit harder on the, and this is going back in 2019. They may be even a little bit tighter than that now. But that's from 80 up from 85% to 87. So that's 2% additional improvement in the time at which they get a full truck within 2 days. So there's two things going on. They get a full truck and they get it within 2 days. Suppliers that fill part of a truck with their goods must hit a 70% on-time threshold, all right, from the 50%. So now that half or part of a truck is typically a negotiated term or condition with Walmart, all right, and they need it 75% or 70% of the time, up from 50%. So again, it's efficiency. So what Walmart does is they get stuff, they track it in their distribution centers, and then they get rid of it. So it doesn't sit around long. So if you're in business at all, if you've studied any kind of accounting or finance, you know that when inventory sits on shelves, it's money sitting on the shelf. So you don't want inventory hanging around. You want to move inventory, turn it. It's called inventory turn. So that's one of the things that we can, those are some of the actionable things that we can do with data. Okay, that data turns into information for Walmart. All right, and obviously they've made it a little bit harder on their suppliers, but that eliminates cost for Walmart and improves profitability. It also improves customer service. All right, so with all of these things, you also, if you're a supplier, you get penalized if you miss these things, right? So they've tried to do that. They've tried. Every target has to have some downside if you don't need it, right? So they've found ways to do that as well. So again, getting the point here is more of a real application of data and how data can be turned into information and how it becomes actionable. That's really the key of what we want to do. So although suppliers are getting more, so I'm down here. Although suppliers are getting more orders in on time since Walmart began imposing penalties for delays, incomplete deliveries are driving as many as 30% out of stock readings in stores. Okay, so just think about the time that you've gone shopping and you've looked for something and they're out of stock. That's pretty annoying, right? So if you really need it or really want it, you're going to go somewhere else for it. Well, Walmart needs to limit, or anybody that sells to customers needs to limit the number of times that happens. You don't want that to happen. So Walmart found a way to measure what was happening where and when, and said that if we increase these numbers, we'll reduce our chance of out of stock. So what Walmart's going for here is a couple things. They're going for efficiency, yes, but they're also going for this reducing out of stock situations. Okay, again, that's more of a customer service kind of thing. All right, so data and analytics all work together, and data turns into information. Information turns into action. Action is something that that we can, it's how we improve business, how we improve organizations, anything that has to operate, or is looking to operate efficiently. That's what we do. So there's an example of kind of another real world example of data and information and how analytics and informatics helps do that. And again, those that are in that field or decide to go into that field, analytics, informatics, data science, I'm going to lump a lot of those things in together because they're similar, but yet there are differences. It's all about information. It's all about getting data, turning it into information, and making it actionable. All right, so that's kind of another one of our anecdotes for the day. All right, so let's jump over real quick to this lecture material. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and jump over to PowerPoint. Any questions, any of that stuff? Pretty self-explanatory, right? Again, try to talk about as many applications of this stuff as possible. All right. So where are we at in our information journey? Well, we talked a little bit about the first couple of weeks about defining a project or defining an information literacy challenge, a problem, something that we want to know, a problem that we're trying to define, whatever that topic is. And in the case of our research project, well, you got a research project to do. You're going to pick a topic and you're going to research that project. Well, now we want to start beginning an approach for how we determine the information that we need. And that's really what this section is all about here. So we're going to look at defining the need in the audience. We're going to start at least beginning our discussion about primary and secondary sources of information. We'll talk a little bit about library of information sources, and then some of these information retrieval systems. Over the next couple of weeks, there's going to be so much more that we're going to talk about in terms of finding and where to go and what kinds of data that we can actually get to. This section down here, the information retrieval systems, talks a little bit about the technology. I don't think I'm going to ask you anything on about the technology used for this in an exam, but it's good to know this kind of stuff. All right. So we want to be able to obviously understand what it is that our main question is. What is our main question? What are we looking for? How do we get really, really focused? And again, you've heard me say a couple times, make sure your topic is very focused. And if you have a question on it, ask, because if you can't get a focused question that you need to research, it's going to be very difficult for you to really focus in on how to get information out of it and explain it. We talked a little bit last time, and the book talks about this as well. It actually has 8 research steps or 8 steps in the process. You can really boil it down to 5. A lot of those 8 that the text talks about are sort of in betweens, if you will. Some of them blend into finding the information, and some of them blend into evaluating the information. But if you had to look at what is the process really from a very simplistic perspective, this is it. We define the need, which we're doing. We find the information that's going to help us explain this or understand this. We're going to evaluate that information, and we're going to evaluate it based on sound logical techniques. What is good information? What is bad information? What is misleading or twisted or filtered information? And what is actual data that we can analyze ourselves and make information from it? So you see the word information a lot in here. Then we organize it. So we found it, we evaluate it. What's good? What am I keeping? What am I throwing away? Then we organize it. What can I use from this source? What can I use from that source? What can I use from each of my sources? What's important? And then extract that, organize it in a way that it'll make sense for me to explain my research or explain my paper, and then communicate it. All right. So the outline. So next week we're going to talk about outlining, and you're going to have an outlining assignment. That outline I'm going to basically give you the outline and say, follow this outline. And that's really helping you organize. When you've defined an outline, it helps you organize, what is it do I want to say? And do I have the information that I need in order to say it? And then communicating it. So again, the project lays out exactly how to communicate it. 8 to 10 pages. You're going to have 3 visuals in that project, no more than a third of a page each. The visuals are going to help you explain a point that you're writing about. And we're going to learn a little bit more in the second half about how to visualize data such that we can actually make a point. All right. So this guaranteed will be a question on your first exam. Guaranteed. This slide right here. All right. So step 1, define the need. Clearly define the need, the concepts relevant to your topic and the related information you need. Define a topic, identify your writing style, define the audience, formulating a main research question, and then develop a focused research question. So this is really what your first assignment is. Formulate a main research question. So my example of self-driving cars reducing traffic fatalities. All right, and then focus it. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do it by researching what the technology in self-driving cars does to eliminate or reduce as much. Well, it will eliminate human error because there'll be no humans behind it, and that will back up that main research question. So it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Again, you can use this cookbook recipe approach for anything that you want to do in terms of research or defining a business problem and solving it. You'll look for, and we're going to talk about these over the next couple of weeks as well, sources. Where can I go and get And like Professor Muckle's video talked about last week, standing on the shoulders of others. What what has been researched and proven and known and widely accepted already? What can I do to build upon that? We're not reinventing the wheel. The wheel's been invented for a long time. Okay. Primary sources, those are the sources closest to the actual event, time period, or individual in question. In other words, primary sources, those would be, classic case would be peer-reviewed science journals where a researcher or a scientist gathered data. They surveyed, they measured, they processed. So they I'll use an IoT for an example. They gathered sensor data. All right. So that is the primary source of that data. They use that data then to analyze it. Maybe they did some various numerical calculations on it, statistics, whatever. That's primary information. All right. So that's coming right from the source. It hasn't been interpreted yet, and it's only been basically studied. All right. So secondary information on that in that case or are sources that have been removed from the primary source that examine, interpret, or reflect on the primary source of information. So someone now, for a secondary source, would be someone has read someone else's research and now formulate some conclusions as to whether or not their research is any good or not, or writes about what was found. That's a secondary source. They're writing about injecting some secondary opinion into what was the primary's work. Now, it doesn't mean it's always a bad thing. In peer-reviewed journals and peer-reviewed materials, vast majority of the time, the secondaries are as equally trained and equally as adept and equally as informed as the primaries are. Okay, so in peer review, it's just getting a different opinion, but from that same level of expertise. So yeah, they are secondary information sources, but they're not at all in any way filtering or judging or in any other way skewing the work that was done by the primary. Why? Because they're all part of that same circle, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Let me give you another example of a secondary. Well, a lot of times secondary sources are reviewers of books or someone writing a web article on, I'll take a business example. So you've got a lot of reporters in the Wall Street Journal writing about a business topic or a company. That's secondary information, writing about an acquisition, one company acquiring another company, and they're going to write about that. Well, they weren't part of that acquisition, but they're writing about the result of that. So the Wall Street Journal will be more of a secondary source. CNBC or Market Watch or Barron's or any one of those sources that are kind of writing about. Granted, there's expertise in the writing. They're typically business writers, but they're writing in secondhand, sort of secondary. Not all bad. Sometimes it's good, and you'll definitely use some of those for sure. So, what are some examples of primary and secondary? All right. So, most of this stuff is just basically factual. All right. Somebody's memoirs, they wrote them. Somebody's diary, they wrote them. Somebody autobiography, they had someone write about them, but they did the research with the person. So it's just speaking for another person. Interviews, public records. Newspaper reports could kind of go either way, right? So you could have that sort of be a secondary. However, in the case why a newspaper report can be a primary is because they could report on just facts. Okay, so there was an explosion in a building downtown Albany. Well, they're just reporting on something that happened. All right, so newspaper reports can kind of go a different way, where you have editorial comment, then you really kind of cross over into the secondary. So you get this news analysis piece of it. Right. So it's one thing to report on literally facts, And then it's another to sort of interpret those facts and give some opinion in there. All right. So it's very, you have to, as a researcher and as you're doing your project, you have to kind of ask yourself, is this really a primary or is it a secondary, and how much fact has been, um, I don't want to say watered down, but how much fact has been extracted or taken away or left or sort of summarized, if you will, maybe the better word, when reporting on something that a secondary is doing. Okay, so the further you get away from the actual data, again, that's what we're talking about, the farther away you are from knowing the details of exactly what happened. All right, so subtle but very important, because the further you get away, and you could have third, fourth, or in the age of social media and the age of information overload everywhere all the time, you're going to have and the capabilities that technology gives us to publish anything, anywhere, anytime. You're going to get secondaries that are really poor purveyors of information, or poor purveyors of what they're trying to come off as fact. All right. So, the more you get into things like blogs, where, again, yeah, maybe there's some level of fact in there, but there's certainly a ton of personal agenda, if you will. I mean, they're doing the blog for a reason. Um, so it's real important to kind of understand what the differences are, and whether or not it's okay to use a secondary. And I'm not saying that all secondaries are bad. Obviously, they're not. But you just gotta kind of judge for yourself how much and how credible is that secondary when it comes to talking about anything that's been done in terms of whatever they're publishing or writing about. That's essentially what that's all about. Then obviously we have to go find that information, seeking it. And these days, as you know, there's just so many different ways of getting it. We don't have limitless time, so we want to do it as efficiently and smartly as we can, and get the best quality that we can from our gathering process. We can use, library information sources, obviously. I mean, just you think about the library being a trusted place for having information. And there's no reason why we can't get that same stuff from the internet. Most of this stuff is digitized in a digitized format. That's same source. It's just in a digitized format, not a printed format, which is fine. Doesn't make it any less meaningful or any less valuable. All right. And then obviously we've got tons of information online. I'm not going to get into all these things. I know you know all these things. The key is just being able to, and I like to use the term vet out the quality or credibility of the source. That's probably the most important thing. It doesn't really matter where you get it. It's just how credible is it. All right. So when we want to search on the web, we're going to talk a little bit about the search process. There are a few slides in here that are old that, some of these search engines I don't even think they exist anymore, but doesn't take away from the approach, doesn't take away from knowing that we can go to digitization or digitized sources in order to find what it is we need to find. And these days, before, when Google was just starting out, it was Google, Yahoo, and Lycos, I believe, or I think it was Lycos. They were like the big three web search engines, right? And then there become too much information overload, and then site-specific kinds of websites began to show up that sort of are subject matter specific, which then said, all right, I don't need to then be having this onslaught of this tsunami of information come at me. I can kind of go to subject-specific search engines or subject-specific blogs or intranet sites and things like that, where the information is more geared towards a particular topic. All right, and we're going to talk a little bit about those databases as well. All right, so obviously the search process is choose the best search tool, formulate the query, perform the search, examine the results, evaluate the credibility. Again, these slides, and here's another one that'll be on an exam as well. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty much a recipe. This is what we do. If we use our search engine properly, we should get a lot of good information that really pertains to what we're looking for. Turns out maybe the subject that we're looking for, it's harder. So maybe we need to look at some very specific databases. All right, and this kind of gives you some examples of how we might do that, the web search process. All right, again, the key is being efficient at it, knowing, you can't look through 20,000 returns on a Google page or 20,000 returns on a Google search. Just can't do it. It's got to be very targeted. We got to get what it is that we're looking for, and we got to do it as efficiently as possible. So obviously here, search tools are easy, large. The index is updated all the time. The most relevant search results are returned. And you see that when you do your Google search. If you put in a phrase, you'll see that at the very bottom in kind of some of the small fine print, you'll see that it'll either have one of the words crossed out. So your search came back with everything but these words were not in it. So Google's gotten better at kind of telling you what it found. It found most of your words, but not all of them. And then there are some advanced, which I think maybe we'll get a chance to take a look at that next week. Some advanced searching, because there's an advanced search screen on Google itself where you can click on that and really get granular as to what you want it to look for. All right, and then knowing what our query needs to be. Right. You could start off with something obviously very specific from a sentence wide. But the key is obviously keywords. Okay, so things like if I want to find, and when you watch Professor Muckle's video, he'll have some examples in there which are actually pretty good. So when you want to find the Constitution, changes to the Constitution over the last 100 years, you might say changes to the Constitution over the last 100 years, or you could use a search which would get you even more specific and return fewer results. Changes, Constitution, 100 years. Okay, taking out some of the extraneous words. Putting your search in double quotes means now that we want the search engine to find exactly those words in that order. So if your search was Constitution changes last 100 years, you put that in double quotes, it's going to search for only those things that have those words in that order, putting them in double quotes. Okay, so those are the kinds of things that we'll do, that you would do during your process in order to find exactly what you need. Now, you can experiment with that as well, okay, to see if it actually helps you get what you're looking for. All right, and then here's an Ask Jeeves. I'm not even sure anybody was around when that was invented. So obviously, keywords. The more keywords, equals focused results. Surround a phrase by quotation marks. Okay, so put the entire phrase in quotation marks. What do they say in here? So what does that say? Sheltie? Yeah, one word. But you might want to, if you were looking for a Sheltie dog, where can I find Sheltie dogs in, the 12203 zip code, or Sheltie dogs in 12203. And then there are targeted, obviously, targeted search engines and targeted search sites. Again, we talk about very subject matter specific. So there are specialized search engines. You could literally search for search engines, and those search engines are very target specific. So search engines and just dogs, or search engines and just breeding dogs, or search engines on different, dogs to do best dogs for training. Okay, that kind of thing. And the engines all have these things called algorithms that rank pages. We're not going to get into kind of the algorithms themselves. We're not going to get any of the algorithms, but we're not going to get into algorithm design, because it's one of those things where the engines change their algorithms every so often, so no one can game them. But there is a method to the madness. There is Google at one point in time published a paper on improving search rankings. And this is going back years ago. I don't even think they talk about it anymore. Everybody thinks they've got it all tackled, and then Google makes a slight change, and your search doesn't, your page doesn't show up as high as it used to. That's when things like AdWords in Google were invented, where you want to guarantee that your website shows up in at least the first 3 or 4 pages of a Google search. Well, then buy some AdWords. So if you are a organization that sells, let's go to a different example. Let's use the dog example. So you're a shelter, right? And you want to kind of put your website out there so that you can get folks to find you. Then you may buy search words or AdWords for certain dog breeds, or shelter dogs, or cats, or pets, or some words that tie your website to those search words. So you buy X number of AdWords or X number of impressions of AdWords. There's a lot of different ways to buy these AdWords, and you spend the money so that when those words are entered into the search engine, your page is one of those pages that shows up, right? It's part of advertising. So this slide deck talks about the search process, and it talks about formulating searches, and it talks about this algorithm here. But these days, search is a business, and anybody that shows up on the first few pages has either bought an AdWord, or they have had such traffic to or popularity in a search that they move up the search algorithm. So it's possible, if you were a very, very popular website for whatever you're doing, and it turns out that tens of thousands, millions of people are searching for you, your page, because it's been frequently looked for, frequently targeted, will then work its way up the ranking, okay, without having to be part of the AdWords algorithm. It's possible. But most ways to get up in that search engine are either through specific ads or specific AdWords that you bought, or your website you've entered the specific words that target that website. All right. So we're not going to get into, the algos and things like that, but there is a method to it. So now, after we've done that, this is again key: evaluating the credibility of the results. Is there authority and objectivity in the material? So is the source you found, website, book, PDF, blog, whatever, a owner or author, or a primary source? Okay, those are usually then they command authority. Those things are considered primary, and they have authority to them. Why? Because either they've owned it, they wrote it, or they were a primary source of it, right? And then in both primary and secondary, we have to look at the objectivity. Is the content fair, unbiased, and is it not skewed towards commercial interest? Now, real common thing these days, as you've probably seen, you may get a, hey, download this white paper on the best best techno or best laptop or best tablet or best digital technology or best hard drive or best whatever for your electronic gadgets. Download this white paper. Well, the white paper is usually not free. It's written by probably a manufacturer or a reseller of that product, right? So there's typically, and it's not to say that it's wrong. It's they're going to give you some technical knowledge maybe, or they're going to give you some insight that you didn't have before. And in exchange for that, you're going to now have their commercial interest put in front of you, whether it's, you have to enter your email address and name, and then they're going to email you. So sometimes there's good information there, but if there is a commercial interest involved in whatever the source is, you got to know that there may be some subjectivity and some skew to that information. All right. So there's not, it's, especially if you're in and I'm in tech all the time. So I'm inundated with tech white papers and in tech kind of what kind of masquerades as information is just marketing. And I'll go back to one that's probably about 5, 6, 7 years old, maybe. Oracle versus Microsoft. So, and for a while there were database wars. All right. So Oracle, that's really what their primary business was, is databases. Well, Microsoft, yeah, they had databases and they did compete head to head. So Oracle would put out this information about these queries ran at 0.2 seconds, over 10 million rows of data. Look at Microsoft's SQL Server. It took them 30 seconds. We are orders of magnitude better than Microsoft. Well, yeah, maybe in that particular query they wrote, or the way they've configured their technology in order to be able to run that query. So again, skewed towards commercial interest. They're better than Microsoft for whatever reason. We see this stuff all the time. And then in addition to the authority and the credibility, you've got scope and quality, depth of coverage, design, and functionality of the web page. Typically, this is mostly talking about web pages. So scope and quality, again, these are things you'd think about when you're writing your project. Is there sufficient depth of coverage of the topic? Is there some sort of detail provided? In other words, is there any kind of fact? Is the topic ever does the topic ever reference work done by others? Does it show data? Does it cite data? Depending on your topic, is it accurate and up to date? So is the information a year old, 2 years old, 3 years old? Not bad. Is it 10 years old, 20 years old? Yeah, probably not really be relevant anymore. All right. And then this one right here, I like to call the triangulation. I think I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Triangulation. So a source from 1, 2, and 3 different sources, and if they're all essentially saying the same thing, that's kind of comparing favorably with other pages in the same topic. So if we're pretty much saying kind of the same thing, maybe one page has an opinion from the author in one direction, another website has opinion in another direction with an author, and then maybe a third has yet a different one, or it kind of aligns with the other. So that's a way for you to be at least reasonably sure with, given the time constraints that you've got, that the information you found has some sort of credibility to it. All right. And then a lot of times a good way to, and this one is, it's a little bit subjective to me, so I don't like to spend too much time on it, but a well-designed and easy to use page doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. All right. If someone spent the time, or some organization spent the time to develop a web page that works with no broken links, and it's reasonably easy to use, chances are the content could be as good as a poorly designed website, or it could be just as good as a incredibly easy to use, pleasing to the eye, whatever website, or it could be better than a very, very good looking. So you'll see this, and you may see this same thing in the ebook, in the text, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is bad. When you go to a website and some of the links are broken, they don't work anymore, you get 404 errors or oops page or whatever the error page is. If you get too many of those, it kind of tells you that there wasn't a lot of time, or there isn't a lot of time spent on maintaining that. So you kind of begin to question the freshness of the information on there. All right. So that's really, I wouldn't say just because you don't like the layout or you don't like the way it's navigated, shouldn't use that as a criteria to say, no, this information's not good, because it may not be the case. Maybe the information is good. You may run across some websites where they direct you to an FTP site where you end up getting just tons of raw data. Well, if it's tons of raw data, chances are if it's raw data and it's coming from a legit site, then that's good information there. All right. It may not be the prettiest navigation or the prettiest website, but there may be really good information in there and help you understand the topic and really be able to write about the topic. So that one's kind of gotta be careful with that one. It can't be a decision that's the web page doesn't look great. It isn't good. All right. So again, evaluating the credibility, authority. Is the source primary? And again, this is a good summary. Is the web page objective? Is any bias clearly stated? Or after you read it, can you see if there is any bias in it? What's the intended audience for this? Okay, how does the information on the web page compare to others in the same topic? So this is a good summary when you're looking about credibility. So in the process of when you gather data and you've chosen sources, reading and evaluating the sources and evaluating the credibility. These are some of the questions. And literally, you don't need to spend too much more time than just this. All right. And if you get enough sources and going through enough sources, you'll kind of get an idea of what is objective and what is not objective. And this goes for anything you do, especially if you're going to do any kind of project where you may have to be, in the business world or the research world, whatever it is you end up doing, and you're going to present some sort of solution to a problem, and you're relying on bad information. You don't want to do that. You want to avoid that if you can, and question and just make sure that you've scoped out whether it's authoritative, it's primary or secondary, and can be trusted. Is it objective? Is the information pretty much the same on others, and not so much on the design and functionality topic. I'll give you a classic example of where you don't do why that's important. So let's say your company, use company or organization, no matter what it is, could be nonprofit, looking at getting into a new product area or a new service, and a very cursory check on the web says, no one else is doing this. No one's got a product like this. No one's got a service like this. And if you don't do enough research or don't do enough in terms of digging for that and then triangulating for that information, you might make a false move or may draw a false conclusion. Spend all your time doing, hey, there's no other product out on the market that does what we want it to do. We're going to invest all this time and money in building this product because no one else is doing it. Well, if you've done due diligence and really spent the time looking and researching, you may find out, well, you know what? That thing we're going to build that product we're going to build or that service we're going to build, it's already in a bunch of other products. It's just not a standalone. And quite honestly, this is a real thing. I've seen this happen. This particular product feature, and it happened from a product owner 2 jobs ago. Says, yeah, we got to get into this whole it's a software product. We got to get into this whole GDPR thing. So if anybody's ever heard of GDPR, the General Data Protection Rule, coming out of Europe, where everyone's data has to be kept secure and safe. You can't reuse it. You can't reuse it, and you have to do your utmost to protect it from being stolen or compromised. And if anyone comes to you as a company, organization, nonprofit, political, whatever, and says, remove my data, you have to remove it. You have to get rid of it. All right. So Europeans have a pretty strict rule around that. And GDPR, it's in now. And if you Google it and research it, you'll see that it's out there. California has a similar rule or similar statute they're trying to do. The United States doesn't have this. So California's got their own called CCPA. I think it's called California Consumer Protection Act or something like that. Pretty sure it's called that. So getting back to this other thing. So yes, we need to get into GDPR. We need to put us, get a project team together. We need to go start building a GDPR product. Well, 2 or 3 months into that project, and I literally saw this happen, turns out that the product owner didn't do enough due diligence to find out, well, this feature, this GDPR functionality is already built into some other legal and compliance tools that are already out there. So it's not like a standalone product. It's part of a bigger objective. Well, reason why is because he just didn't spend the time really understanding what that was, and didn't research it enough to know that what he thought was a standalone product turns out to be it's part of or embedded in a lot of other products. It's very, very similar to personal information. It's PII, all of that stuff. It's not really a thing in and of itself. It's just part of the whole data gathering and data governance. All right. So that's why, you need to spend the time doing research, triangulating and coming at it, from a different bunch of different objectives, and then doing these things, not necessarily caring about the design of the functionality, but if you just search GDPR, well, now you can, and you can get tons of stuff, but back then you couldn't, and it wasn't a thing. It was just part of compliance. It was part of data governance. So real world example. That's why this person didn't take any information literacy classes, I guess. And then directories again. So directories are specialized search tools. We talked about them a little while ago. And directories are essentially compiled hierarchical web pages. All right. So the idea behind these directories is they're very subject matter specific. All right. So many universities and research institutions use directories, especially when there's downloadable content. So if we're looking for specific research on drones, we can find directories or search particular directories on that. If we're looking for cybersecurity, we can find that. If we're looking for science, genome, DNA, RNA, COVID, all those things, we can find, well, COVID's a different one. That's everywhere, but we can find directories with specific subject matter in them, and then focus our research around the directory versus having to go to Google and do casting a wide net. All right. So here's another example. Again, now coming back to this isn't the prettiest website in the world. And you could argue, I don't want to spend my time clicking through a lot of this stuff, but it turns out something like this, which is a hierarchical directory. You click on a link, it brings you to this. Click on a link, it brings you to that, and it maybe even bring you to a couple other layers. But by the time you get to where you're going, you may find, critical data or critical information in your topic. All right. So directories are important as well. All right. So engines have major components to them. They have spiders, bots, or web crawlers. And essentially what it's doing is it's starting out at a web page, and going and clicking on all or reading all of the links in the page. So Google isn't doing those searches on the fly. When you type a Google search, it's not going out and searching the web. You're never going to return back. It's already done that, and it continues to do that. It continues to scour the web, hitting a page, going to all the links in those pages, and all those pages have links, and they have links, and they have links. Again, it's a web, as we know. And they build a database based on that information. And they're good, and the reason why they're so popular now is they were good at categorizing and indexing that information such that we could find it quickly and find it easily. We take all that stuff for granted now, but that's the way they worked versus the way the other search engines worked at the time when they came out. They didn't do that same kind of crawling and building indexes to make it very simple and quick to find things. So they would build a few indexes, and then they'd build a few indexes, and then they would then go search for other information as needed. So in other words, they would give you some level of detail, and if you wanted more, then they would have to go out and get it. Whereas Google decided, I'm going to get everything I can get my hands on, put it into this big databases, index it. So if you think about just taking just a quick technology discussion for a second, and I won't test you on this either, but indexing, when you index something, you're essentially taking a small piece of the information, creating a smaller table of search, alphabetizing that, and then and then when you alphabetize, it's very simple to find what you're looking for. So it's like an index in a book. Okay, you're looking for a topic, you know it's in alphabetical order, you just go right to the section you want, and it takes you to a number. And that's essentially how indexing works in databases. Okay, the content's back there, but it's not what you search. You search the index. The index takes you to the page number, and the page number takes you directly to the content that you're looking for. And each one of those things that comes back in the results of the Google search are that. You're kind of doing a search, if you will, on the index. And if you search through the book, you may come back with a bunch of different page hits on the index for a topic you're looking for. And then the results of that index are shown to you. That's why it's so fast. So again, that's more of a technology thing than information literacy, but you get the idea. Questions so far on any of this stuff? Pretty straightforward. Again, the whole idea is process. Get a good process, follow it. Make things very simple and easy for yourself. The web crawler typically, and I probably will ask you something about this right here. And I will ask you on an exam about keywords. So typically web pages have a page title, a URL, which is essentially just the HTTPS www.whatever.com. That's the URL. We know that. Meta tag keywords, we typically don't see those. I'm not sure if I have examples of meta tag keywords. I might somewhere in here. Meta tag keywords are lines in the web page, and they literally have the word meta tag on them, or meta something on them. And those are lines of code in the web page that we don't see because they're not displayable. But yet when the search engine reads the page, it reads those meta tags. And a good design for a web page basically tells the search engine what's on the page, what the topic of the page is, the author, any special technology that it's used, and a couple of other things that help the search engine understand what the web page is. So those meta tags are read by the search engine when it reads the page. We typically don't see them because there's really nothing there for us to look at. That doesn't help add any content to the screen. But meta tags are things that are important for helping the search engine know what is on your web page. And good creator of, so if you're looking to get picked up by search engines and you're looking to get indexed and you're looking to get high page ranks, you're going to want to have good meta tags inside your website. All right. So an example of a meta tag might be meta keywords. All right. So meta tag keywords equals, and you'll put a keyword, a comma, a keyword, comma, a keyword, comma, a keyword, and then close off the end of that meta tag. All right. So now when the search engine reads the page, it reads the meta tag and says, oh, okay, these are keywords that describe what is in the page. So it might be pets, dogs, breeds, um, um, vaccinations, whatever. All right. So those words tell the search engine what it's about, and they begin to build that index. All right. So you'll probably have a question or two on your exam about meta tags, and you can Google what meta tags are too if you want to get a little bit more of an understanding. But just know that they're tags that we typically don't see. They're not displayable tags. It's code, HTML code inside the page, but it gives the search engine an understanding of what is on that page. All right. And then keywords in the page. So again, part of when the search engine reads the page, it's looking for keywords. Do what you say in your keywords. Now, again, Google used to do this because people used to try to game early on before AdWords. They used to try to game the index by putting all these, like overloading it with keywords, like popular words, just to get the engine to index it. But turns out the words they threw into their meta tag didn't have anything to do with their web page. So if your web page is all about dogs and breeds and vaccinations for dogs and all about dogs, and all of a sudden you put things like pizza and soda and beer and pickup trucks and whatever, which don't pertain to anything on your web page, just to kind of get words so that if someone searches for it, they would find your page. Well, Google they got really good, and it's not going back years ago, but they got really good at that. So the keywords that you say on your meta tag don't match your web page, that actually counted against you. So they'd say, all right, you're trying to game it. We're going to throw your page out, or we're going to index it so low that no one will ever find it. So that was some of the things they did. And then internal links. You can have links. Now, again, getting back to search tools and what makes search good is that there's obviously links to other pages. So, when you have a page, right, there's information about your stuff on there, and then there's links to other pages. There always is. Sometimes you can make your own page or pages very easy to navigate by putting internal links inside. So if your page is really, really long, you may have at the very, very top, you may have 10 links that point to other sections within your page. So someone doesn't have to scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. They can just click on a link and it brings you to another link inside your page. Those are called anchor tags inside of pages. Okay, so all of those things find their way into the search engines. All right, and then obviously we can have customized toolbars inside of our browser that allow us to search specifically. These things are kind of outdated now. They're really more of a security risk because too much code, too much malicious code can be put into these toolbars, and too many toolbars can be created that have malicious code in them. So this isn't really a popular thing to do anymore. And then you have meta search engines, which is kind of a searches of searches. So sometimes these things are really annoying in that you'll type a search phrase into Google, you'll get links to pages and links to legit sites, and then you'll get links to other pages, which are other search engines. These are called meta search engines. Again, they're trying to obviously generate traffic, but they're trying to also focus on topics. I don't particularly find too many of these meta search engines all that useful. But you can use them if you do find them. I'm not going to look at any of those. And then, let's see. I know when we were in class. Yeah, I'm going to talk about this again. Just let me check real quick. I'm going to talk about truth tables again. I think it's next week, but let me just see here. 4. Week 4. I don't think I talk about it in week 4. Week 5. No, I don't talk about it in week 5 either. I thought I did. About week 6. I do. Okay. So I'm going to talk about this again in week 6. Can everybody still see my PowerPoint? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm going to talk about this again in week 6, but I'm going to mention just real quick these, what are called truth tables. They're called Boolean operators as well, and I think there's going to be a video on them probably next week or the week after. But what they do, if you've ever heard of truth tables before, they're Boolean, meaning it's either one or the other. So in the and, so we have an and Boolean operator that says if I, we'll just use the example, I'm ordering out at a restaurant and I want the fillet and I want the lobster tail. So when the waiter gives you your meal, you expect to have both the fillet and the lobster. You don't want one of them, you want them both. Same thing with the and. The and means that both things have to be present. So this and that. And both of those things have to be present in order for a result to be returned. And that's the way it works in a search. So if you say dog, so if you say dog and Cocker Spaniel, your search needs to have dog and Cocker Spaniel. It needs to have both of those in order for that search to happen. So Google, if you do that in Google, both of those terms must show up in the index or it isn't going to return a result. So, and both of those terms have to be present. And you can string along a whole bunch of ands. So you can do dog and Cocker Spaniel and Doberman and Rottweiler and then searches have to come back with all of those terms. Okay. And in order to get a result, all of the terms must be present in that search. Contrast that to or, any one of those can be there. So if Cocker Spaniel or breed or Cocker Spaniel or Rottweiler or Doberman, you're going to get more results because it's any one of those or all of them possibly. All right. So or is a lot more, or actually put it this way, it's a lot less restrictive. So any one of those values can be in there. So constitution or changes or 100 years would be a crazy one because any one of those words showing up in an index would bring back search results. Whereas constitution and changes and 100 years, all of those terms must be there in order for the result to be returned. All right, we're going to go over that again. Just throwing it out there now because it's part of the whole search techniques, but we're going to go over that again in a couple of weeks. And then the not is very simple. So I want breed and Doberman, not German Shepherd. So any one of the breeds that comes back, it's going to be Doberman and not German Shepherd. So I shouldn't get any German Shepherds in my search results. Okay, the not says do not have that. So exclude that in my search. All right, we're going to go over some of these examples because we probably will use them a little bit in our data section as well. All right. Yahoo, kind of old and dated, but you will get this same kind of thing in Google as well. So there's a more there was a more, at least on the Yahoo page, but there's always an advanced search on any one of these search engines, and Google has it as well. And that advanced search allows you to do those and, ors, and nots. All right. And then in the advanced search, you can really, really filter out what it is you're looking for and find things very, very specific. So if you go to the advanced search, you can list, you can use Boolean operators, and you can also put things on like language. I only want this in English. I only want file types of PDF, for instance, or doc or HTML. And I only want sources that come from the international IEEE.org, for instance, or barons.com, or edu, star.edu sites, or .edu sites. Okay, meaning I want you to search through for all the stuff I'm looking for, and then at the end, go through and filter out only the domains that have these .com, barons.com, or albany.edu, or just .edu. So I want only educational websites that come back in these filtered results. So there's a lot of ways to really, really filter down what you're looking for. All right, and here's an example of a Bing advanced search. Okay, so here only .uk's. So in this case, we're going to do social media, political elections. So there's no and in there. So Bing is going to search for all those words, and they don't all have to be there. Any one of those is going to be present. However, I only want the .uk. Let's just make sure. Yeah, the .uk, see the dots in there. The .uk domains return. So I'm going to search for a whole bunch of things, but I'm only going to get websites that have a .uk domain. I could do a .edu there, or a .net, or whatever. And that way we're going to limit down the kinds of search results that we see. Search bars, obviously the address bar is what we put along the top. Again, I don't like to talk too much about these extensions that are added into our browser, because some of them are really not safe. We don't necessarily need to do that. Sometimes there's quick, browsers have these quick pick menu searches built into them. You can use them if you want. Most of the time, this stuff, these search providers are settings inside the browser. They're not necessarily found on the pages. Now there's just so many options that you can turn on inside your browsers. These are more settings than anything else. You could basically tell your browser, hey, I only want you to let search Google. That's why all these browsers basically kind of try to force you into using their search engine, obviously, right? Google's going to say, don't use any other search engine, only use Google. So that's why most of the time there's a default search engine to go look for when you're trying to search from your browser. Autocomplete, we sometimes see that, right? If you've done the search before, you'll see the drop down and there'll be autocomplete. It'll try to complete based on what you've typed and what it has in its cache. We all kind of know how to navigate these. Find, so if we were to do a Control F on a web page or any search page, Control F, you get that little find box. For Chrome, it's top. For Edge, it's the top. For Firefox, it's the lower left where the search comes up, and you can basically type in a word and it'll search on the page for that word. All right, so that's useful when you have a large web page, and you can kind of tell when you look at the vertical scroll bar here that if the page is really long, that vertical scroll bar is going to be long. And it's possible that whatever web page you found that you want to use and that you search for, it might be a long web page, in which case that Control F or that find might be useful to try to find occurrences of the word or series of text on somewhere on the page. All right, so it's a nice nice thing. And again, we have some of these, like we talked about, some of these specialized search engines. And again, they're usually typically subsets of the um, big engine. And again, people aren't flocking to these kinds of things. Why? Because Google does a really good job of continuously optimizing their search engine. So sometimes they're good. Again, you may find that it brings you to a community of websites that actually give you, what you're kind of looking for. And we're not going to get into any of these specialized searches. We all know about these things. LexisNexis used to be like kind of the de facto when it came to legal and business and news. It used to be, I say it used to be, it kind of still is. The only problem with this kind of thing is in order to get a LexisNexis, um, access to LexisNexis, you typically have to go through a library for that. I mean, most of the big libraries have a license to use LexisNexis, um, but it's a paid service. Granted, it's good, but it's a paid service. So it's if you find that you're doing research on that, you're probably best to go through the libraries, university's library, in order to get through LexisNexis, in order to be able to use some of these sources. Um, Hoovers are another one. And then we're going to talk about some of these as well. There's just so many government sources of information and raw data. There's just tons and tons of data sets out there with raw data. USA.gov, Census Bureau, usafacts.org is a pretty decent one. usafacts.org is not a government website. However, it uses all of the data, the raw data from the government websites, and it summarizes it in a way that it's easy for you to kind of to digest and understand and use it. A lot of the data that comes from the government is in a very raw data set. So in other words, you have to do the processing, you have to do the summarization of that data, you have to do the querying of that data in order to get what you're looking for. Researchers do it, obviously, right? We got the tools built to process big data sets, but usafacts.org is pretty decent in that it's done that work for you. So that's a pretty good one. We're going to talk about some of these other sources as well. And that's the end of that section. Pretty good, I think a pretty good overview of kind of if you were just brand new to this and you say, hey, what's the best way to get from point A to point B and get this project done? Well, this is a pretty decent, again, overview. We've talked, high level about what the process is. You're at this step 1 right now. You're going to be at that step 2 pretty soon. And then from this point forward, from 3 through 5 in the process, you'll spend the vast majority of the semester doing that till you get to the point where you're writing it in step 5 of the process. So pretty decent overall summarization of the process. Questions on any of that? Questions? Not too bad. Hopefully everybody's got a pretty clear idea of, how to go about this, what they're doing, and, kind of what the scope is. It's really a question of you picking a topic that you like and want to work on and then follow the recipe, basically. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I want to go back to Blackboard. Well, actually, I'll go to Blackboard real quick. And then just to show you. All right. So, yeah, I want to go back there. Let's go here. All right. So we talked a little bit about this. Most of everything that I talked about in the slide deck is also in these links here. And again, I'm not going to read these links to you. Take these, do these outside of here as part of your assignment. Again, that video is pretty decent from Professor Muckle. The Purdue online writing lab is actually pretty good as well. UAlbany's got one too. And basically what this does is it helps kind of figure out how you want to go about writing, helps you with research citation, other resources, subject-specific writing, if you want help writing or you need help writing. Got some advertising going on. API guides, MLA guides, pretty much everything you need in order to do it. Again, Citation Fox is a great one for helping you cite it. So there's really not a lot of sweating that you're going to need to do when it comes to citing these things. That'll be pretty simple and pretty easy for you. So let's take a real quick look at the final project instructions. Downloads. All right. I'm going to share my screen again. All right, so here's the document for our final research project. Again, it's a topic of your choice. Some ideas: social networking, privacy issues, digital divide, texting and driving, self-driving cars, cybersecurity, pretty much anything. I want to really open it up because, again, like I said, it's easier to write it and research it and spend the time on it when it's a topic that you're interested in versus me telling you what to do. Got to be done by the 15th of May, 11:59. It's like right at the edge of finals. So there's really no time for me to get these things graded and grades in. So they got to be done by that date. That's a hard and fast date. Without, late submissions will not be accepted unless there's a university approved excuse. So obviously if something happens, and there's a good reason for it not to be, you obviously got to contact me and then contact the university on that. So the final project has to include the title of the topic you're writing about. Okay, so again, you're picking your topic now and you're just going to put that on a cover page. Right at the beginning of that paper, you're typically just going to write, sort of rehash or just restate what your topic is. And have an opening paragraph that kind of sets the stage for how you're gonna write about it. Not too different than how you would intro into anything other, any other kind of writing project. You're gonna want to have citations with annotations of the source. In other words, if you talk about a topic or during your paper, or a topic or a piece of data or an information or a fact that is not of your own, you're going to want to cite that out of one of your sources. There's a rubric which I will share with you in a couple of weeks. It's actually out on the course documents if you want to take a look at it now. It tells you how many sources you've got to have. You got to have 4 minimum. 4 is fine, 5 is fine, 6 is fine. It's just 4 minimum. That's why when you're doing your you're picking your sources early, you're going to want to probably have more than 4 just in case by the time you start evaluating and organizing it, it may turn out that, hey, some of the stuff's just not credible enough for me to use. So you don't really want to go with 4, I don't think, unless you're sure of those 4 that you're going to use them, because you may end up throwing them out at the end. And then an APA style format. All right. And again, citing and Citation Fox is going to show you exactly how to do it. There's not a source of information that Citation Fox doesn't have the format of way to cite that in your paper. So it's very simple. Sources should include 1 or more of the following. Not all sources are required. So a book, an online dictionary, articles from scholarly journals, online articles, newspapers, authoritative web pages. Notice I say authoritative web pages, right? We want credible web pages. We don't want Joe's down the street electric car conspiracy theories, as part of one of your, one of your sources. Not credible. Statistical resource using a statistical database. Again, these are sources, 1 or more of the following. Again, not all of them. You can use podcast or web video. So an authoritative podcast or web video, you won't drop the video of the webcast in your paper, but you'll cite it and say, hey, according to so-and-so on the webcast, was one of the podcasts that I was listening to for a while. Masters of Business with what's his name there? I think of it. Masters of Business is a decent podcast. I was listening to that. Just 30-minute, little snippets of business. From Rithold, Barry Rithold. Yeah, from Rithold Management, or Rithold Wealth Management. And you can say, according to, webcast, it usually will tell you either the date or the number of it. A webcast from Masters of Business on the date of February 16th, 2021. The webcast talked about how business is changing. The landscape of business is changing with the push of ESG, environmental, social, and governance policies, and getting away from carbon free, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can just talk about what was stated in there. Government data, obviously, there's just tons and tons of it. And then if you have some other sources that you don't know, if you think they're going to be credible, you can run it by me. So the paper must have at least 8 pages of content, but no more than 10, not including the cover page and the citations page. So your cover page, which topic is, there'll be, by the time you get to writing it, I think around week 10 or 11, I'm going to show you some examples of papers from the past that have scored well, and you can get a feel for how they were done. What was I going to say? Yeah. So then the cover page, and then your intro, and then you write about it again. You're going to write an outline, which will be your next assignment, and which basically your paper is going to flesh out what's in your outline. Right. And then the 8, no more than 10. And then after that, your citations page. So then you will have 3 visuals, right, in the form of a chart, a table, a graph, or other visual data that supports a point in your paper. So you'll have 3 visuals, no more than 1/3 of the page. So we don't want to, have 3 visuals, 3 pages long, and all of a sudden that's 6 pages of your paper. So three visuals, no more than 1/3 of a page. If they're bigger, they need to be shrunken down so they fit on 1/3 of the page. Roughly 1/3 of the page would be something like, say, like that right there. Yeah, it's actually a little more than 1/3. Probably like this. Yeah. Some visual that, and in your travels of doing your research, be easy to find one of those. So we're going to discuss various aspects of this project in class. Most of the homework assignments will consist of, will assist in researching and or preparing this project. So again, 3 assignments help you build this thing out, and plenty of time to build it out. Your first 3 assignments will be the building blocks. Completing these assignments will make constructing your final very straightforward. The assignments are as follows. Assignment 1, choosing your thesis statement, choosing your topic and writing your thesis statement. That's assigned tonight, due next week. Next week will be assigned outlining. So you've picked your topic. Now, what are 4 points that will help you? And we're going to go over that. I think it's next week, what that might look like in an outline. And then selecting your sources. So those are your first 3 assignments. One after another, given a week each. And that's essentially the project. So again, the idea is that it's built out step by step. And you have multiple attempts to get, I don't anticipate you having to rework it over and over again, but you'll have multiple attempts to do it. And then again, after that, it'll make writing it very easy at that point. So again, it's a process. All right. Any questions on that? Question.
I have a question on assignment 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for the sources we pick for assignment 3, do they have to be the sources that we use in the final project, or can we add or remove certain sources for a final project?
I would prefer if you do anything, you remove. If it turns out, let's say, for instance, you've got 3 that you use in your final that you also had at assignment 3 and you add 1, no big deal, I don't think, but I don't want to see you submit a bunch of sources, throw them all away, and then come up with 4 new at the end. Does that answer the question at all? It's not a
Yes.
simple yes or no.
All right. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so that's why I say pick a bunch, cast a little bit of a wider net, and then you can always skinny that net down, and toss later on. So if you submit 5 or 6 or 7, and and then you only use 4, it's fine at the end.
All right.
The
Cool.
idea is
Thank
to
you.
get you thinking about the sources now, so you don't wait to the end, and at the same time, see how easy it is going to be to cite them using Citation Fox. That's kind of the idea. All right. Anybody else have a question? All right. So if you do, I'm going to stick around for a few more minutes. So if you wanted to stick around and ask about your topic, feel free. If not, we are at 7:36, pretty close to where I thought we'd be. And that'll be it for this week. Work on your assignment, and we will meet again next week, hopefully there at the university. All right. Good
Thank
night.
you.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Good
Professor.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
Professor.
night.
Have a good one.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome. Good night.
Hey, Professor.